You choose a profile image and study it longer than you expected. You refine the caption until it sounds spontaneous. You publish, reconsider, delete, then perhaps delete the revised version too. Later, a stranger replies, and something disproportionate moves through you. A fury that occupies the afternoon, or a longing that makes an unknown person feel strangely necessary. These are ordinary gestures, yet placed together, they reveal an extraordinary division. The profile presents continuity, the same face, the same tone, the same recognizable arrangement of convictions and desires. But the person maintaining it is not continuous in that way. You contradict yourself, you outgrow moods before the page can register them. You want to be seen, then want to disappear. Your inner life keeps changing while the profile remembers and rewards one version of you. Curation is not the enemy. Selection makes communication possible. No one can reveal every thought, every conflict, every private transformation in every encounter. A digital face can help you enter relationship, establish context, and become recognizable to others. It is useful precisely because it is partial. But here is the danger. A partial face can begin demanding the authority of a whole identity. Then the polished image does more than represent you. It decides what may be shown. The deleted post becomes more than discretion. It marks a thought or feeling that no longer seems permitted to belong to you. And the stranger's reply becomes more than an opinion. It touches something excluded, unlived, or disowned, giving a distant person astonishing psychological weight. So the central question is not whether your online self is authentic or false. It is more unsettling. What happens when the identity built to represent you begins to feel more psychologically real than the living person it represents? When does the mask stop serving its wearer and begin authoring them? To answer that, we will move through 5 recurring patterns. Persona, the face adapted for contact. Shadow, what that face excludes. Projection, what returns through other people. Trickster behavior, which can loosen a rigid identity or evade responsibility. And inflation, where a powerful role grows larger than the person carrying it. These are not diagnoses. They are not social media personality types, badges, or permanent identities. They are patterns of experience and behavior movements to observe, not labels to become. The aim is not total exposure, nor the destruction of your profile. It is to recover choice, to recognize the image, revise it, step into it, and step back out. But first, we must understand why the public mask exists at all, because without some mask, contact itself would become impossible. The public mask exists because every encounter asks something different of you. In one setting, you speak professionally. In another, intimately. You may enter a conversation as a comic presence, a political participant, an aesthetic curator, or a teacher trying to make one idea clear. None of these faces contains your entire life. Each selects what can meaningfully appear within a particular relationship. That selection is the persona. It is neither your hidden, final self, nor a counterfeit placed over it. It is the form through which a complex person becomes available to a social world. Without selection, privacy would disappear, purpose would blur, and every exchange would collapse beneath the impossible demand to disclose everything at once. Restraint can be honest. Curation can be considerate. A boundary can make genuine contact possible. The mask is not the enemy. It becomes an enemy when it claims to be the face beneath every other face. This distinction matters because online roles are unusually easy to mistake for identities. Creator, expert, rebel, caretaker, critic. Each name can describe a position you occupy in an exchange. It may identify what you offer, what others seek from you, or how a particular community has learned to recognize you. But a position is not an essence. The creator is also allowed to be unreceptive, unproductive, or private. The expert remains capable of uncertainty. The caretaker still has needs. The critic may desire what they publicly resist. You enact a role. You are not exhausted by it. The same modesty is necessary when speaking of archetypes. An archetype is not an exclusive online species into which a person can be permanently sorted. It is a recurring organizing pattern that may take form through many people, situations, stories, and relationships. You can participate in the pattern of the guide without becoming the guide in every room. You can carry the rebel in one conflict and seek belonging in another. The pattern may illuminate what is happening, but it does not grant rank, rarity, or special authority. This vocabulary is being made accessible because inaccessible language cannot help anyone observe ordinary experience. Yet, accessibility is not proof. These terms may organize attention. They do not diagnose another person's motives, establish what caused a behavior, or certify the framework as clinical fact. Their value here is as disciplined questions. What role am I occupying? What does this encounter require? What am I withholding for good reason? What have I begun withholding because the role forbids it? Maturity, then, is not the performance of a maskless life. It is remembering that the person remains larger than the presentation and remembering why that presentation was chosen. The real danger begins later, almost invisibly, when attention repeatedly rewards one face until what began as an instrument of contact becomes a role you feel compelled to obey. At first, recognition feels like relief. You offer one recognizable feature of yourself, a tone, a conviction, a way of making meaning, and someone responds. The response says, "I understand what you are doing here," so you offer it again. It is rewarded again. Repetition establishes expectation. Expectation encourages further repetition, and gradually you begin anticipating the response before you have decided what you actually want to express. This does not happen to everyone, and it need not happen every time. It is a possible feedback cycle, one you can test against your own experience. The profile has no literal will. When we speak as though the persona makes demands, we are describing how audience expectation can be internalized until self-monitoring begins to feel like an outside command. The authority remains psychological, but its consequences can still be real. There are 3 signs worth noticing. First, does silence begin to feel like disappearance? Not merely disappointing, but strangely annihilating, as though an unacknowledged experience scarcely occurred. Second, does deviation feel like betrayal? A change in tone, interest, or conviction may seem less like development than a violation of the relationship your audience believes it has with you. Third, does visible response begin deciding what matters? You may feel something deeply, yet doubt its significance because it attracted no recognition. Meanwhile, a rewarded fragment is repeated until it occupies more space than its importance deserves. This is the creator's dilemma in its most intimate form. The clearer the public identity becomes, the more disruptive ordinary contradiction can feel. Consistency may serve craft. It can build trust, clarify an offering, and help others know why they are present. But what appears to be discipline may sometimes be fear. The fear that if you become less predictable, you will become unrecognizable to those whose recognition now confirms you. How can you distinguish devotion from compulsion? Ask what happens when you interrupt the pattern. Can you pause without feeling erased? Can you change register without rushing to explain yourself? Can you disappoint an expectation without experiencing that disappointment as the revocation of your right to belong? Chosen craft permits movement, even when movement has consequences. Compulsion treats variation as a threat to existence. That is the threshold. Recognition is no longer something you receive, it has become something you must reproduce. Maintaining the role's recognizability begins to matter more than allowing contradiction to be experienced. The persona then hardens, not because curation is inherently false, but because the range of permitted expression keeps narrowing. And every narrowing creates a remainder. The anger that would disturb the agreeable voice, the doubt that would interrupt certainty, the desire that would complicate the established position, these do not vanish. So where do they go when the public identity can no longer contain them? They gather in the unsent words, the deletions, and the private reactions that seem to belong to someone else. What gathers there is often called the shadow, not a secret monster and not a second personality waiting to take control, but the possibilities you have disowned or insufficiently recognized as your own. Aggression may enter it, but so may tenderness, envy, dependency, ambition, uncertainty, unlived creativity. The shadow can contain whatever conflicts with the identity you have learned to maintain. This is why reducing the shadow to evil is so misleading. An admirable capacity can become shadowed when your rewarded persona has no place for it. If you are valued for toughness, tenderness may feel humiliating. If you are known for humility, ambition may appear morally contaminated. If belonging depends upon skepticism, hope itself can become embarrassing. The issue is not whether a trait looks dark or light. The issue is whether you can acknowledge it as part of your human range. Return to the deleted post. Deletion may be wise. You may recognize that an impulse is cruel, a disclosure unsafe, a claim premature, or a confidence not yours to reveal. Privacy is not repression, and restraint is not cowardice. Yet when the same kind of expression repeatedly produces panic, when you must erase every trace of need, pride, softness, resentment, or uncertainty, the deletion may be marking a boundary. Your persona is fiercely defending. The decisive difference is between inhibition and disavowal. Responsible inhibition says, "This capacity exists in me, and I choose not to enact it here." Disavowal says, "I could never feel this. I am not the kind of person who could want that." The first preserves agency. The second protects an image by placing part of your experience beyond recognition. Consider the complementary forms this can take. The relentlessly kind persona may be unable to recognize anger until it erupts as contempt. The invulnerable expert may conceal uncertainty even from themselves. The permanent rebel may ridicule attachment because the wish to belong feels intolerable. These are reflective possibilities, not verdicts about anyone's hidden motives. Their value lies in the question they provoke. What has your public identity made difficult to own? But ownership is not permission. Shadow work does not transform cruelty into authenticity or make every impulse worthy of expression. It asks for more responsibility, not less. You cannot choose how to relate to a possibility while insisting it is absent. Once acknowledged, an impulse can be examined, contained, redirected, refused, or given an ethical form. What is recognized becomes available to judgment. So make a private inventory. What do you repeatedly remove before anyone can see it? What do you mock in advance so no one can discover that you desire it? What quality do you condemn with such certainty that imagining it in yourself feels almost unbearable? You do not need to publish the answers. You need only stop confusing concealment from others with absence from yourself. Because what cannot be recognized inwardly does not remain quiet. It may soon appear outside you, concentrated in a stranger who seems impossibly arrogant, needy, weak, free, desirable, or dangerous. And then the question becomes more unsettling. Are you responding only to what is there, or also to something in yourself that has finally found another face? The screen goes dark, but the reply remains in your body. The stranger is absent. The argument continues. You rehearse better answers, infer hidden motives, assemble evidence from fragments. Hours later, you are no longer responding to a sentence. You are responding to a figure that has grown inside your attention. Projection is a lens for examining that growth. It does not declare that every strong reaction is imaginary, or that whatever disturbs you secretly describes you. It asks a narrower question. Has an unrecognized quality in your own range been fastened to another person, giving them more psychological magnitude than the available facts can support? The sequence can happen quickly. An encounter triggers effect. Effect produces certainty. Certainty reduces the stranger to one defining trait. Now they are not someone who acted arrogantly. They are arrogance itself. Not someone who displayed dependency, but weakness incarnate. The real person recedes, and the simplified figure begins carrying a conflict larger than the exchange. Negative projection makes certain qualities unbearable. Another person's vanity, aggression, fragility, or hunger for attention may genuinely be present. Yet the intensity of your response may increase when the corresponding capacity cannot be admitted inwardly. Perhaps you cannot recognize your own wish to be admired, your own force, your own vulnerability, your own need. What is forbidden in you becomes monstrous in them. But projection also appears as devotion. A stranger can seem perfectly free, beautiful, wise, or authentic, not merely admirable, but complete. You imagine that they possess the life withheld from you. Their confidence becomes your permission. Their attention becomes rescue. Here, too, a complex person is reduced, only now, into a savior. Idealization and condemnation seem opposite, but both can make someone carry a possibility, you have not begun to approach directly. This is the essential warning. Withdrawing projection does not prove the other person behaved well. Self-examination is not acquittal. You may still name deception, refuse mistreatment, end contact, or preserve a boundary. The task is to separate ethical judgment from psychological enlargement. Ask 3 questions. What did this person actually do? What story did I add about who they are entirely? And which trait I have assigned to them belongs somewhere within my own possible human range? The first protects reality, the second reveals amplification, the third restores responsibility. Then the stranger may shrink to human scale, neither monster nor savior, but a person temporarily burdened with carrying part of your unlived life. The energy invested in watching, attacking, or worshipping them can begin returning as information about what you fear, desire, or refuse to become. Public conflict intensifies because this rarely happens on only one side. 2 simplified personas address each other, while 2 unacknowledged shadows provide the emotional force. Each becomes proof of the other's preferred story. Each reaction confirms the caricature. And once fixed identities begin colliding this way, another pattern arrives, one that delights in breaking roles, swapping faces, imitating certainty, and turning seriousness into play. The question is whether that disruption creates freedom, or merely makes responsibility impossible. That pattern is the trickster, not a permanent kind of user, but a recurring movement through reversal, disguise, imitation, humor, and the testing of rules. Digital life gives it unusual freedom. A person can change names, borrow voices, invert expectations, and expose solemn performances by refusing to treat them solemnly. At its most creative, this energy restores movement where identity has become rigid. Parody can reveal the contradiction hidden inside an official statement. A playful pseudonym can permit experiments that a recognized persona cannot yet sustain. An unfamiliar voice can uncover capacities buried beneath consistency. Laughter can puncture a role that has begun confusing its importance with the importance of the person performing it. This is not mere avoidance. Sometimes play tells the truth that direct speech cannot reach. But the same flexibility has a shadow. Reversal can become baiting. Disguise can become deception. Imitation can become humiliation. The person who provokes a reaction may suddenly abandon every identity involved. The words were not sincere, the account was not serious, the target was foolish for caring. Whenever consequences arrive, the trickster changes masks and declares that no one was ever there. Ambiguity can open possibility. Ambiguity used to escape accountability becomes concealment. 2 questions help separate these forms. Does the humor make more reality visible, including an uncomfortable reality about the speaker? Or does it keep the speaker permanently beyond reach while everyone else absorbs the consequences? Does a second identity create room for exploration? Or does it divide responsibility, allowing one voice to perform impulses that the official voice refuses to acknowledge? This is where trickster behavior reconnects with shadow. An alternate account may express anger forbidden by the agreeable persona. An ironic voice may carry hunger, envy, aggression, or desire while preserving deniability. That does not make the experiment worthless. It means the experiment has revealed something. Integration begins when the person can recognize the impulse as theirs, judge its effects, and decide what ethical form, if any, it should take. Cleverness is not innocence. Cruelty does not become profound because it arrives wearing wit. Disruption is not liberation merely because it embarrasses authority or breaks a rule. Integrated play enlarges what can be said while retaining ownership of what was done. Destructive play demands freedom for the act and exemption for the actor. Yet, there is another danger inside the exhilaration itself. To reverse a room, puncture a false certainty, or move between identities can feel like access to unusual power. Soon, the performer may stop saying, "I participated in a disruptive pattern," and begin believing, "I am the one who sees through every pattern." Then, play hardens into prestige. The shapeshifter acquires a throne, and the role, once again, begins growing larger than the ordinary person who carries it. Inflation begins at precisely this threshold, when the magnitude of a role is mistaken for the magnitude of the person performing it. Here, inflation is not a diagnosis, nor proof of vanity. It is a Jungian lens for observing identification, especially the moment borrowed symbolic authority begins to feel like personal possession. A role may temporarily organize experience as sage, savior, rebel, victim, judge, prophet, or healer. These are not fixed user categories. They are recurring patterns that can gather around a person because of what the moment requires, what the audience desires, and what the person has learned to provide. The danger appears in a subtle grammatical shift. You no longer explain something. You must be the one who knows. You no longer oppose one injustice. You must embody opposition itself. You no longer help. You become the indispensable source of healing. Projection helps complete the transformation. An audience may place unusual wisdom, purity, courage, or deliverance upon a public figure. Repeated loyalty can make that projected magnitude feel deserved, then inherent. What began as a function becomes an essence. What began as trust becomes evidence of destiny. You can recognize the change by what becomes unbearable. Criticism feels less like correction than sacrilege. Audience loyalty feels like proof that your claims are true. Rest feels like betrayal of a mission. Ordinary uncertainty becomes intolerable because the role cannot merely be mistaken. Its authority must remain untouched. The persona has become more psychologically real than the person, when human limits must be sacrificed to protect it. And every superhuman image produces a compensating shadow. The more omniscient the persona appears, the more fiercely ignorance must be concealed. The more independent the rebel appears, the more humiliating dependence becomes. The purer the judge, the more dangerous contradiction feels. Weakness does not disappear. It is driven out of sight, where it can return as secrecy, defensiveness, contempt, or collapse. Here is the reversal inflation resists. A gift may move through you without belonging exclusively to you. You may speak wisely without becoming wisdom. You may help someone without becoming their savior. You may reveal a falsehood without becoming the final authority on truth. Capacity calls for stewardship, not coronation. Even psychological language can intensify the problem. Archetypal names meant to loosen identification can become crowns, excuses, or declarations of rarity. I am participating in this pattern preserves movement and proportion. This pattern proves what I essentially am, builds a grander prison. A vocabulary of depth has failed when it gives the ego more prestigious names for refusing correction. Influence, therefore, increases responsibility. The stronger the public role becomes, the more deliberately you must preserve reciprocity, welcome correction, protect relationships in which you possess no special rank, and maintain a life that does not depend upon performing symbolic importance. Archetypal patterns can enlarge experience. Identification with them can shrink the human being required to sustain them. And what does daily life become when an ordinary person must continually keep an extraordinary image from descending to human scale? Daily life becomes an argument against your own change. The threshold is crossed when inner experience is treated not as information, but as an inconvenience to the image. You feel differently, want differently, understand differently, and immediately ask whether the recognized version of you will permit it. Your changing life must defend itself before a public identity that is no longer allowed to change. The cost may appear as identity fatigue, the exhaustion of continuously converting a complicated life into familiar evidence. It may appear as compulsive comparison, private numbness, fear of silence, or dependence on outrage, because outrage can rapidly restore a fading sense of position. None of these experiences proves that a persona caused them, and none should be turned into a diagnosis. The useful question is smaller. When they arise, do you still possess flexibility, choice, and the ability to recover? An inflated persona behaves like a creditor. It demands payment in consistency, output, certainty, and recognizable emotion. If people know you through confidence, doubt becomes a debt. If they know you through intensity, calm feels insufficient. If they know you through perpetual conflict, peace threatens the very coherence of the role. You may continue producing what is expected long after the experience that gave it life has ended. This is how private self-abandonment can support increasing public coherence. And what has been abandoned will seek another entrance. The shadow may return as burnout, envy toward those who seem free to change, an accidental disclosure, or a hostile overreaction that exceeds the event. Trickster energy may turn against the reputation itself. Missed obligations, reckless contradictions, deliberate provocations, the strange impulse to damage what has become unbearable to maintain. These disruptions are not automatically hidden messages, and they do not excuse harm. But sometimes sabotage expresses a freedom the conscious identity has refused to negotiate responsibly. The paradox is severe. From outside, the profile looks more unified than ever. Its tone is exact, its position is legible, its audience knows what each appearance means. Behind it, life feels discontinuous. One part performs, another watches, another withdraws, another waits for a rupture large enough to end the obligation. Then comes the quietest low point. You look at a version of yourself that everyone recognizes and privately wonder where you have gone. But disappearance is not the remedy. Returning to yourself does not require deleting every account, confessing every secret, rejecting the audience, or making privacy itself suspicious. Temporary strain is not possession, and fatigue is not proof of illness. Notice instead whether the role permits interruption, revision, contradiction, and recovery. The task is not to destroy the image. It is to end its authority over change and recover the choice to loosen the mask without losing the relationships it once made possible. Begin before the post, the reply, the performance. Pause long enough to name what has been activated: the judge, the rescuer, the victim, the rebel, the performer, the trickster. Naming the role does not condemn it. It creates a small distance between the pattern moving through you and the action you are about to choose. Then separate what urgency has fused together, what actually happened. What story have you added about what the event proves? What human capacity might your reaction reveal in you? Perhaps the other person was vain, dependent, aggressive, hungry, or unusually free. Reality does not need to be denied, but withdrawing projection begins with a modest admission. I also possess some capacity for vanity, dependency, aggression, longing, or freedom. This is not a confession of equivalence. It is ownership of possibility. That ownership may remain private. Integration does not require turning every discovery into content. Create one place where experience is protected from performance. An unpublished draft, an honest conversation, a physical practice, a deliberate interval of silence. Let something matter without asking it to become visible, useful, impressive, or recognizable. A life that is never translated for an audience begins recovering its own weight. Now give the persona conscious limits. Define what the account serves, what it cannot hold, and which expectations you are willing to disappoint. If the role requires certainty, permit an unanswered question. If it demands constant availability, permit an absence. The purpose is not random inconsistency. It is to establish that recognition may influence the relationship without governing the whole person. Practice the opposite movement where no one can reward you for it. Let the expert learn awkwardly. Let the helper receive care. Let the rebel cooperate without calling cooperation surrender. Let the polished creator make something imperfect and keep it private. These acts restore capacities that public repetition may have pushed outside the permitted identity. The same principle disciplines the trickster and the shadow. Play can invert, parody, and experiment, but it must retain an author when consequences arrive. Shadow can inform chosen behavior, but recognition of an impulse does not require its indiscriminate enactment. Freedom without ownership becomes evasion. Ownership without judgment becomes another form of inflation. Finally, build a ritual for correction. State the error without theatrical self-destruction. Repair harm where repair is possible. Revise the public position. Allow those who preferred the previous version to be disappointed. Revision is not annihilation. It is evidence that the role remains answerable to reality. Integration does not eliminate persona, shadow, projection, trickster activity, or archetypal influence. It creates a wider relationship to them. You can enter a role without becoming its title, encounter a powerful pattern without claiming its rank, and leave a performance without disappearing. The profile remains usable because it is no longer total, coherent without becoming rigid, public without consuming privacy, recognizable without forbidding change. Return now to the three gestures with which we began. The curated profile does not need to be destroyed. It can remain a deliberate entrance into relationship, provided it is allowed to represent you without ruling you. The deleted post no longer needs to become evidence of cowardice or falseness. It can become a question: what was wisely restrained and what was impossible for the maintained image to admit? And the stranger who seized your attention can become an occasion for discernment, someone whose actual conduct matters, but whose psychological magnitude must still be examined. The distinctions are now simple enough to carry with you. The persona is a tool, not the total self. The shadow is a responsibility, not a license. Projection is a clue, not a verdict. The trickster is a movement, not an exemption. The archetype is a pattern, not a crown. A less divided identity is not one that reveals everything. It is one that can preserve privacy without pretending inner contradiction does not exist. It can sustain a public role without swearing permanent loyalty to every opinion, tone, or desire once associated with it. It can be recognizable and still remain alive. This is the mature distinction. The achievement is not discovering that you belong to an exceptional psychological category. That would merely offer inflation a more sophisticated costume. The achievement is becoming more accountable for the patterns moving through you, noticing what seeks expression, judging what deserves action, owning consequences, and accepting that no symbolic role removes you from ordinary human limits. You can now use the public face consciously. You can alter it without treating revision as betrayal. You can retrieve qualities assigned to enemies and saviors. You can hear correction without collapsing into shame or defending a sacred image. You can keep experiences that never become posts, arguments, lessons, or proof of who you are. If the sentence names a commitment you genuinely wish to make, say it plainly. I can use the mask without becoming it. Share this only with someone experiencing the exhaustion of having to remain recognizable at all costs. And if you continue this examination, let it be for deeper discernment, not for membership in a superior identity, and not for a promised transformation that no framework can guarantee. Wholeness online is not perfect authenticity. It is the freedom to remain larger than every image through which you become visible. The integrated face is not fixed. It is the face that can change, without making change feel like disappearance.